So, let's see. We do have Commissioner Loncala's participating virtually, and Commissioner Lytle's stuck in an airport somewhere, so he's not able to join us. So, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome guests. Cassie, go through the virtual meeting guidance, please.
Good morning, Commissioners, members of the public, and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. While the Commission and staff are in person, we are still offering a Zoom option so members of the public can attend. If you are attending virtually and would like to speak, you can do so during appearances by the public. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube, and the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. Finally, Commissioners, please use your microphones while speaking and make sure your voice is directed towards the mic. When you are not speaking, please ensure that your mic is off so others can utilize the mics. And as a reminder, only 3 of the table mics can be live at a time. Also, please state your name before speaking for those who may be joining us via Zoom. Those are the decorum rules of the District Commission. Thank you for following them, and let's have a great meeting.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. Any announcements, sir? No announcements. Okay, then we have a welcome to Anna Schultz, Industrial Electrician Apprentice, introduced by Jim Meyer.
So yeah, I'm just introducing Anna. Anna comes to us from GoEx, where she worked on electrical, plumbing, and mechanical. Found electrical to be the most interesting, so that kind of led to her pursuit of a position here at MMSD, and she's joined our electrical department. So Anna lives in Janesville, has 2 daughters, got a lot of pets, 16 ducks, 10 chickens, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a bearded dragon. So keeps Anna busy. So Anna's hobbies are gardening, reading, taking care of the animals, and just spending time with her daughters. Thank you.
Okay. That's appearances by the public. Any appearances by the public? Don't see any hands up, so we'll move on. So we've got the consent calendar, the approval of the minutes from the December meeting, cash statement capital fund, then we have a few sanitary sewer extension plans, town of Westport, and mainly, but otherwise mainly Madison. And then a review and proposal and award of contract for IT developer backfill for the ERP, and review of bids and award of contract for 26 cross-town force main saddle tapping sleeve replacement project. Do we have any questions on any of the items before we get a motion? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
This is Commissioner Freeze. I'll move approval.
Motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by
Commissioner Bookland. I'll
second by Commissioner Bookland to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed, everybody, and I think I heard Badri's vote. Okay. That will take us to topics where we have the commission election and committee assignments. So, do we have any nominations for, we'll do the elections first and then committee assignments? Any nominations?
Is there open discussion?
Yes.
Okay, good. Current people, are you interested continuing?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, well then I'll make a general motion for Tom, Ezra, and Brad to continue in their current roles as President, Vice President, and Secretary.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by...
I'll second that motion. Commissioner Clark.
Second by Commissioner Clark to continue with the current slate of officers. Any further nominations or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, then we get the committee assignments, where we have the Personnel Committee, Subcommittee, and the Finance Subcommittee. Is anybody not wanting to continue their assignments on those?
I will just ask, Patrick's not here, but, Dan, does anybody want to remove me as the, no? No, okay, all right. Because I'm more than willing to let one of you gentlemen, take over. Okay.
Okay. So, can we have a motion to continue with the current slate of, committee assignments?
I will make that motion, Commissioner Freeze.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Freese, second by,
I'll second it. Murphy.
second by Commissioner Murphy to continue with the current slate of committee assignments. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And any opposed? None, motion carries. Well, thank you very much, everybody that serves on the, committees. That's a lot of extra time, I know. Okay. That will take us to Marty, who's gonna update us on the WPDES permit and reissuance process.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Marty Griffin, Ecosystem Services Manager. I'm going to give you a quick overview of our WPDES permit and our reissuance process. Wrong way. Orange button. Yeah. So very quickly, just give a little context about the size, scope of the district for those of you may be unaware. We serve about 435,000 people in 24 communities, and our service area spans about 190 square miles. And so we do own infrastructure, 50 pumping stations, 150 miles of pipe, and our sort of output is that we recover 14 billion gallons of water annually, but we also recycle 37 million gallons of biosolids annually, and biosolids is something that's governed by our permit, so that's important to know. And we operate around the clock, 365 days a year. So why do we need a permit? Well, the WPDES permit program is authorized by the Wisconsin DNR. So the Wisconsin DNR issues permits to wastewater utilities for the discharge to public waters, and that is federal oversight to that program by U.S. EPA under the Clean Water Act. So the district currently does have a WPDES permit to legally discharge treated effluent to Badfish Creek. And this permit has requirements that are imposed by the DNR on the district. The district must meet these requirements to be in compliance with statewide water quality standards, and that makes sure we're in compliance with the Clean Water Act at the same time. Our permit also regulates the land application of biosolids, like I mentioned, and also outlines the district's authority to regulate others, like our industrial users, and that's part of our approved pretreatment program. So our permit requirements not only impact biosolids recycling as part of MetroGrow, but also how we administer pretreatment and the quality of the water that we recycle that goes into Badfish Creek. So complying with these permit requirements is pretty critical to the success of the district and is really a part of our performance indicators in this district strategic plan. So how did we get here? Well, the WPDES permit terms are for 5 years. The last permit that was issued to the district was in 2020. So every 5 years, the district undergoes a permit reissuance process. So in 2024, we started that process by doing some pre-permit monitoring, working with DNR. Typically, when some major things might change in statewide water quality standards, DNR allows you to pre-monitor to make sure that you're going to be able to meet those standards, and if you're not, help work with you to make sure you can actually do it. In 2024 is when we also actually applied for our new discharge permit. There's requirements under the law that says you need to apply for your new permit so many months before your permit expires. Our permit currently expired in 2025. So in 2025, we met a lot with DNR. We had a lot of meetings, and we finally culminated in a pre-public notice fact check where district staff was able to look at a pre-version of the permit with the DNR to make sure we were all comfortable with what it said. And now we're in 2026. So in 2026, we have a scheduled public notice that the DNR administers. We have a public hearing that the DNR is in charge of, and there's also a public comment period that's allowed. So that's where we're at in the timeline. And the one thing I do want to make sure that it's aware is that this timeline is pretty long. You can see it's spanning almost now 2 years, and that means that there's a lot of staff working behind the scenes to make sure that we inform and help DNR understand how the district operates and how permit requirements impact the district. And that takes a lot of time. So that makes sure that when we get to the end of this process, there's something that everyone can be comfortable with. So input to the permit writers and a lot of staff work is very important in this process. One example I'll give of this is you'll see one of the requirements that I'll talk about is a change in how we look at bacteria. And we did a multiple month side-by-side comparison of how we currently do bacteria related to the change that the DNR was asking for to make sure that the requirements that were going to come down were going to work for us. And so to make sure that we could put in new methods, make sure that we were going to do it correctly, and that's sort of some of the pre-work that I talk about that staff are involved in. So getting to the permit changes. So when a permit's reissued, if there's any changes in statewide water quality standards that happen during your current permit term, those automatically get put in by the DNR, right? So that makes sure that your discharge always meets the latest and greatest standards to meet statewide water quality. These types of standards are things that impact most wastewater utilities across the state because they're statewide standards that all utilities have to meet. So I'll run through some of what these changes are in our permit related to that sort of category of changes. We have total suspended solids, and so for our total suspended solids in our particular area, for Badfish Creek, they're governed by the Rock River TMDL, that total maximum daily load. And so that went into effect many years ago in 2011, but that total maximum daily load calls for changes in total suspended solids requirements over the term of the TMDL. So our compliance with TSS is being met with adaptive management, but that does mean that our total suspended solids requirements and our permit changes in accordance with the TMDL. The other requirements you see on the screen are related to testing, monitoring, and reporting. So we have new testing, monitoring, and reporting for all those parameters you see on the screen. For mercury, our effluent mercury monitoring changed from taking grab samples, is what we currently have in our permit, to taking now 24-hour flow proportional samples. So a little bit change in how we collect samples. PFAS is a new one. PFAS, when it comes to testing, reporting, we have now effluent monitoring and reporting monthly requirement for PFOS and PFOA for biosolids. And we also have monitoring and reporting annually for biosolids as well. So we have a lot of different requirements for PFAS when it comes to our effluent and when it comes to our biosolids. When it comes to our biosolids, we also have a new thing we need to report, which is the sum of PFOA and PFOS. And if you remember the PFAS presentation I give in the past, I do talk about that. That information is already on our website. So we currently do that, but that's now a requirement in our permit. One of the new ones in our permit is biochemical oxygen demand. So our current permit has CBOD, but that's being replaced with BOD, and that's for influent and for effluent. And just familiarize people with what BOD is, or biochemical oxygen demand. That just measures the oxygen. That just measures the oxygen used to break down all organic matter in like a sample, right? So it makes sure that our wastewater isn't going to like suffocate the stream when we discharge it out. Bacteria, the one I just was telling you a story about. Our bacteria change is related to a statewide water quality standard change, and that is our change from F. coli to E. coli. So our current permit has us monitoring for F. coli. We are now changing to E. coli. And just so people kind of know the relationship between those, E. coli is a subset of F. coli. So fecal coliforms, F. coli, live in all warm-blooded animals, but E. coli is a more accurate indicator of fecal pollution because E. coli is the only sort of coliform that doesn't sort of grow in the environment. It only grows inside living animals. So we switched from F. coli to E. coli to get a little bit more focused in on when you're looking at bacteria impacts. And then the last thing that's common in all permits you'll see going forward is our flow. So our influent effluent flow monitoring changed from continuous to daily. All right, so our next group of permit changes you'll see are unique to the district's permit. So these are things that you may not see in all permits across the state for utilities. These are things specific to the district's permit. The first one is outfall consolidation. So our new permit authorizes only one discharge point at Badfish Creek. Our adaptive management plan, we do use watershed adaptive management. That's our approach to achieve phosphorus and TSS permit compliance, as I mentioned. That was first put in our permit for the Badfish Creek outfall in 2020. This new permit continues this, but we had to update our adaptive management plan, and that had to be approved by the district, by the DNR. So that happened, and some of the updates that had to happen for this permit term are related to administrative and technical updates. They're updated monitoring and reporting locations for better tracking of our phosphorus loads. And then because of the outfall consolidation, our total phosphorus goal update changed. So our goal for adaptive management in our current permit term is 95,000 pounds at the end of the 20-year project. That's now increased to 109,000 pounds at the end of the 20-year project. That 20-year timeline in our adaptive management was also adjusted to align with 4 consecutive 5-year permit terms. So our new permit will be the second adaptive management permit term for us. When it comes to phosphorus limits, our discharge limit for phosphorus will now be lower than our previous permit term. And that matches the interim permit limits that are in our adaptive management schedule. And so in our new permit, our total phosphorus 6-month average interim limit changes from 0.6 milligrams per liter to 0.5 milligrams per liter. That's a change in our phosphorus permit limit. We also have 2 variances that we apply for our permit, and variances are basically allowances to the statewide water quality effluent limit that are different, that require EPA approvals. So basically, when you ask for a variance and receive a variance, if you're a WPDES permit holder, that basically allows the department, the DNR, to give you interim limits that show progress toward compliance, but gives you additional time and sort of a flexible pathway towards finally meeting those water quality standards. So when it comes to our variances in the district permit, we applied for 2 variances. We got 1 of them. The first variance we actually received was a chloride variance. And so our previous permit also had a chloride variance. Our previous permit had a chloride variance with seasonal interim limits, which meant that we actually had 2 interim limits in our current permit. We have a separate winter limit and a separate summer limit, right? Our new permit continues our chloride variance, but instead of 2 separate seasonal limits, we now have 1 single annual limit, right? So we removed the seasonal limits, and now we just have 1 full variance limit. That's what happened in the new permit. The new permit also continues the requirement to have source reduction measures and a pollution minimization plan for chloride. The new limit I'm talking about, the change decreases the interim limit, right? So our current permit used to have 2 limits. We used to have 430 milligrams per liter for the summer for chloride and 465 milligrams per liter for the winter. We're now changing to 1 annual variance limit. That will be 408 milligrams per liter, so it's going down. The weekly average, an annual limit. Mercury variance. Our current permit does have a mercury variance. Our new permit will no longer have a mercury variance. So we will no longer have any water quality-based effluent limit for mercury. The reason for that is because variances are not forever, and there are calculations that the DNR can do under code to look at your past performance, how you're doing, and actually meeting permit limits and water quality standards. And if they think that you do not have any reasonable potential to exceed those permit limits, you no longer need a variance to that limit. In some cases, you no longer need a limit at all, and that's our case with mercury. Our source reduction measures programs, all the work we've been doing long before I got here at the district, has done such a great job that the DNR, based on our current data for effluent, no longer thinks we require a mercury variance. We no longer have a mercury limit. We don't have a mercury variance. But that doesn't mean we don't have to do anything with mercury. We still have reporting and monitoring requirements for mercury. We also still have to maintain and continue our pollution minimization plan to make sure we continue keeping under that mercury water quality limit, right? So we still have to do all the work, but we don't actually have a limit. So the way the story works is next permit term, we'll have no limit for mercury, but we'll continue to monitor and submit data to DNR. And our next permit term, we'll see how well we're doing, and DNR will make a decision on what it looks like for the next permit term. But for this current permit term, we do not have a limit for mercury. So no mercury variance, no limit for mercury. All right, switching to PFAS. So PFAS, as you all are aware, we've been voluntarily, as a district, collecting PFAS data since 2021, especially for effluent. And so what we did with the DNR and then what's allowed under the current water quality standards under the rule for PFAS is that you can request a waiver from the DNR for reduced monitoring frequency for PFAS. And so that's what we did. We applied for a waiver for reduced monitoring frequency for PFOS and PFOA since we had been doing it for a while. And that would also influence pollutant minimization plan requirements that I've also been discussing for other parameters. We did not get the reduction in monitoring for PFOA and PFOS, so our permit does not reduce or eliminate PFOS and PFOA monitoring requirements, so we do have monitoring requirements for PFAS in our permit. But what we don't have, and what's unique to the district's permit, is that we don't have a pathway set out in our permit to require the determination of need for a pollutant minimization plan. So if you would look at permits across the state for most utilities for PFAS, there'll be standards in the permit looking at calculations and assessments to determine if you need a pollutant minimization plan for PFAS. Because we had past data and past information, the DNR concluded that we don't need that assessment. All we need to do is continue monitoring for PFAS, so that's what we're going to do.
Generally speaking, on PFAS, do you know how many of is it like quite prevalent in sewer districts throughout the state?
Permit requirements, is that what you're asking?
Well, the presence of PFAS, you know, and has the DNR, they put this in because it's like in 90% of the wastewater, do you know, or maybe you don't know that?
So
I'm curious how prevalent it is throughout the state.
I don't know if I can answer the question about the prevalence of PFAS in other utilities across the state. I'm sure there's data out there I could look up. PFAS is in our permit because it's required by statewide water quality standards. There's an administrative rule that requires PFAS to be put in all wastewater discharges for WPDES permits, so that's why we have it in there. The way the DNR administers statewide rule implementation is the rule, after the rule is implemented, once you come up for reissuance, it gets inserted into your permit. So it's in our permit because of statewide water quality rule requirements, not because of any sort of study that the DNR did looking at prevalence or non-prevalence in wastewater discharges.
Okay, one other question then on PFAS. You know, when we first started this, we had to go to some outside testing to do it. Are we trying to bring this now testing in-house since we have to do it more regularly, or we still have to send it out?
Great question. We're definitely assessing the options of doing that right now. So we are still currently using a consultant to do our PFAS sampling. We probably will continue to do that for permit requirements at least for the early part of our permit term, and we'll continue our assessment and see if it does actually make sense based on the DNR requirements and what actually the district wants to do when it comes to PFAS sampling, if it makes sense to bring it in.
I have a question. So, Marty, we haven't identified any single point sources of PFAS in our district, have we?
So currently we have not, and we have not saw in our PFAS data any sort of like indicator PFAS species or compounds that would point to one particular industry or a particular sector. So that's what our PFAS data is telling us now, yeah. All right, one more to go. Oh, one more question.
One thing about PFAS, I live in a PFAS hot area, 5 minutes from here. Like 4 areas in Dane County that the watershed is pretty bad. The airport's one's over here, and there's one Northport. There's a couple areas that are bad in this area. People are on bottled water on some houses. But you can't get it out, but you got to drill a new well a lot deeper. The well, we just drilled a new well. It's 360 feet deep. Get away from the water, get away from PFAS. So there is hot spots around here, and I'm sure it gets into here. We flush it there, coming here, so coming in. The airport, all because of the foam and all the stuff, all that ground out there is really bad. It's in the area. One question if we fail or we don't meet our chloride thing, we get slapped on the hand, or what happens?
A great question. The question is that if we have a variance limit and we don't meet a variance limit, what happens? So variances are combined with pollution minimization plans and things like that. So if the data shows that we're not meeting our chloride variance limit, DNR can come back and do adjustments or look at what we're actually doing to try to meet it and tell us we need to do more or do better. So it's sort of an iterative process. It doesn't result in an initial or immediate notice violation or anything like that, right? But it does put us on notice that what we're doing isn't working and that DNR could require us to do additional things or do things differently to make it work.
So as long as we're asking a question, I was going to ask that question later, Marty. So, you know, the monthly scorecard that Alan puts up, we can be pretty close to the old chloride limit at times, right? I mean, I didn't pull up the old data to do the math, but I assume you and Alan have. And with the lowered number, lower overall and much lower, significantly lower for the winter months, if we go back and look at, you know, historical, where are we, would we have, with the new lower number, what I'm wondering about is, like, in the last 5 years, would we have had exceedances?
Answer is yes. We definitely went back and looked at that data. Answer is yes. We would have had more. There's no doubt about it. Fact.
But that is not it's not in our control for this basically salt getting into the water. So I mean, it's upstream, literally causing it. It's not that it just seems like you need to go after Dane County roads and stuff like that, or all that gets into our stuff versus us being at fault. We're just one being scored. I mean, the teacher is bad, so the students bad scores there. Doesn't make sense.
Yes, that is why we have a chloride variance. Managing chloride in our effluent is very challenging for those reasons you just pointed out, and that's why our pollutant minimization plan, our source reduction programs do look at all sources of chloride. Road salt and those things are sort of one of those. So that's something we continue to work on, and that's we're going to keep doing that to keep keeping those levels low. So it's a challenge, like you pointed out. There's no doubt about it.
One comment on that, the DNR always seems to want to put on point source, like the district, problems from non-point source. And we're supposed to do it all while they don't control the non-point.
All right, so I have one more special permit change specific to the district to get through, and we'll finish up here. The last one here on this slide that we didn't talk about that you see is chronic hull effluent toxicity testing. So that's our wet testing. And so our wet testing limits did change, and that's because our in-stream waste concentration percentage changed. So as part of our permit process, I mean, you look at the materials, you'll see we have a water quality-based effluent limit memo, and it uses calculations to say how much of your discharge contributes to the receiving stream, right? And so they can look at your percentage to the receiving stream. That's like your in-stream waste concentration sort of contribution, right, to the stream. And so if they change that, contribution, that can change some limits that get calculated through that water quality-based effluent limit memo I talked about. And so that's exactly what happened here. Our in-stream waste concentration changed from 93% in our current permit to 100% in our proposed draft permit. So that changed our chronic wet testing value from 1.1 to 1.0. I'll just preempt any questions on that one by saying that we did also look at the data for that, and we would have been pushing right up against that new limit, so, and maybe potentially going over. So there's some factual data for that as well, impacts to changing the limit for our wet testing, but we should be okay with that. All right, so those are all the changes. You have all those listed in the materials. I want to just reissue the timeline on where we're at and what the district is actually going to be doing. So the public notice was issued in December 12th, which meant that we're currently in the middle of the public process administered by DNR and the public comments. And so the district is going to prepare comments for this permit. We'll provide written comments. I'm sure you guys can guess about some of those of what they'll be. Certainly we'll be talking about chloride. We'll be talking about in-stream waste concentration. Those are the two big ones. And so we'll prepare those. We'll participate in the public hearing process, and then we'll submit our public comments. And so the public informational hearing is again scheduled for January 27th, and the public comment period ends February 3rd. So we'll make sure our comments are in before that date. After the public comment period closes, so after February 3rd, what's going to happen is DNR will take all that information in consideration, decide if they're going to make changes, if any, to the permit, and then issue a notice of final determination, which basically summarizes all the actions that the DNR took to reach the current permit that they're going to issue us. Then they'll issue us our final permit. As with any department or DNR determination that affects the district, we do have the ability to challenge any decision, so we do have appeal rights on that permit, and we'll see what the final permit says, and if that's something that the commission of the district wants to take any additional steps once we see our final permit. So that's the process, that's what we got, that's what we're looking at. So at that point, if there's any additional questions, we can get to those now.
I got a question. The public hearing, who holds that?
Yeah, the public hearing is all administered by the DNR, so this is their permit, their process, as I mentioned. So they control everything, the timelines, the recording of the comments, and the issuing of the response to the comments. Right?
Okay, but is it in front of like a hearing examiner or just a staff member, or who's like, you know, like in public government, municipal government is typically before a plant commissioner. So DNR, who's that decider on the hearing?
Sure. So this is Vanessa Wishart, legal counsel for the district. The hearing is just a public hearing. It's not a contested case hearing of any sort. So there's no administrative law judge or decision maker in the process. It is DNR staff who make themselves available to take public comments on the permit. So they'll walk through, typically they provide kind of a summary of updates to the permit as it's planned for reissuance, and then they'll provide an opportunity for public comment.
So just a question then, are the same people that are holding the hearing that basically gave us these permit limits?
Right, yes, it's staff members involved in working on the permit.
So the likelihood of them taking public comment and changing something, say the chloride limit, raising it up a little bit, probably not likely unless they heard a lot of input from the public.
So
is
yeah,
a ridiculous limit, or?
Certainly DNR takes into account all of the public comments it receives, and like Marty said, they issue a notice of final determination that responds to each of those public comments. So there is the potential for the permit to change after the public comment period. We don't generally see a lot of changes during that process, but certainly, again, DNR takes those comments into account.
And was that what happened? Was it during the public hearing when they changed our timing for our disinfection? I think that was kind of a blind side to us, because I think it came up at a public hearing and then they just decided to change it. Right?
That's correct.
chances are they go more restrictive, not less restrictive, I guess what I'm saying.
Again, it can depend on what public comments they're receiving.
Wanted to ask one, Marty, thanks for the informative presentation and writing in today. Ezra Meyer, Commissioner and Vice President. I wanted to ask the phosphorus. I have some vague recollections of how this works. I wanted to check it with you. The limit for us changes from 0.6 to 0.5. I know on the overall picture, we're using watershed adaptive management to deal with phosphorus, but doesn't that also have some implications for our end of pipe number and what we have to meet? Or am I remembering that wrong?
Not quite. So because we chose watershed adaptive management, the adaptive management plan dictates where the point of compliance is for the phosphorus standard. So it is not the end of our pipe. It's right now at the end of the sub-watershed that the end of our pipe resides in. So it would be one of the numbered named stream reaches in our adaptive management plan. I believe it's 69, but please don't quote me on that, anybody listening. So that's where the point of compliance is dictated through the adaptive management plan, not in our permit. The permit just gives us our limit. And so the interim limit is 0.5 now, and then future permit terms, that interim limit will continue to go down until it gets to 0.075, which is the final phosphorus standard.
Okay, thank you. And that will take us to the study session. Seth McClure, we're going to begin our district strategic plan performance area evaluation, and we were going to try to tackle two, but they cut it down to just tackling one at this point, one per meeting generally, right? Okay, Seth?
Eric Dundee, Executive Director. So just as you guys begin to hear about these performance areas, I want to kind of bring us back to the December meeting, almost a month ago now, of the strategic plan and overall. I did put a paper copy of the first plan that was from 2022 on the desk, the hard copy. If anybody needs that online, we can put a link in there. But otherwise, the idea is we gave the overall plan, or where we're at in the strategic plan update in December. As you listen to these performance areas, I would like you to think about how you want to be involved. So some of the feedback from December was, where's commissioner involvement in this? So for me, the commission, we developed this as an executive director and the staff, we developed this based on a first-year goal. So the executive director first-year goals was to help develop strategic planning and prioritize. As the district worked on that as a staff, the whole point was to make it actionable. So we had the 2022 plan that had indicators in it, performance areas. We focused that down. What you'll hear today is the first performance area, working on indicators, how we know we're successful, and then really concentrating on the 3-year plan and the district management plan. That's for future conversations, and as staff will develop that. But as you think about that, where do you as a commission want to be involved? Is it with a work plan? You guys want to have specific topics that you want staff to take up? You want to take up your own topics? Is it about deciding where the indicators, what's acceptable, what's not, in the ranges of what we get for data and performance? So I just wanted to put that out there as you hear about these, and know this is 2 months of hearing about one at a time, and then in March, we would come back and have a study session as a commission, figure out what involvement is there. So with that, Seth, please take it away.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's been a while since I've been here. My name is Seth McClure. My current job title is Planning Engineer. And I have been involved in the strategic planning of the district for several years now, including developing these key performance indicators that I'm going to be talking about today. I'm also going to be reviewing at a high level what these performance areas are. What I'd like to do is go through one performance area and its attendant performance indicators at a time, and then give you all a chance to ask questions. If we can get through more than one today, that's great, but the goal is to just do one, and we're going to start with finance. But I want to talk first about how these key performance indicators were chosen. We used the performance areas from the last draft of the strategic plan that I know that you are all very familiar with at this point. We felt that that draft of the strategic plan was actually quite good in outlining what we needed to do to fulfill our purpose. What it was missing was a way to make it real, or as Eric said, actionable, and then a way to talk about the efforts we had made and the effect of those efforts on those performance areas, right? And so what we did was we went out and looked at other utilities. There are various resources for this. We gathered a whole set of what you might call industry standard key performance indicators for water utilities, wastewater utilities, and other sort of public institutions like ourselves. Those were then vetted by our district management team in a series of workshops where every manager got to look at every possible indicator and rate them according to their feeling on how impactful it would be, how available the data would be, and would it be a good communication tool. The way I have it described here is, would this KPI provide useful information? The cost of gathering that information, how difficult would it be to gather the data? So is the juice worth the squeeze? And then finally, would this KPI be a useful communication tool? Like, would it be meaningful to talk about it in public? Meaning, like, these key performance indicators are what you could consider a commission or public-facing indicator. We have lots of other things that we use to judge how we're doing with finer grained details about our work in various divisions, but these would be things that would be district overall. And that's why the whole management team was involved in every single indicator. We decided to take off our individual hats for what divisions we were in and look at these as a district. What would be the best for the district and what would communicate our performance. So, moving on. So the first one that we're going to tackle today is financial capacity and resilience. And the way we think about this performance area is that attention to revenue sources and spending is foundational to executing our purpose. We need to have adequate financial resources to fund our required work for infrastructure maintenance and permit compliance, and resilience during financial disruptions, right? We have to be able to pay for the things that we're doing, and we have to have some kind of reserve to deal with emergencies or bumps in the road, which are inevitable. So, first indicator that was agreed on by the group was balance relative to reserve requirements. And this, I think, should be pretty familiar. The reserve fund balance relative to required reserves are months of operating expenses that we have held back. And this, we felt, was an excellent indicator of that second part of the performance area, like how well are we able to weather various storms and emergencies. That a lot of this is data has been gathered already or is part of our regular order of business. At the end of this, I'm gonna show where we are with all of these various indicators. Talk about that. Second one, this is going to require a little more explanation here. Some of you may have heard of a NESE curve. Some of you may have not, but I'm going to present an example after we talk through this. Spending in line with at-risk assets. That's kind of a mouthful. What it means is it's a comparison of actual replacement and maintenance budget to the estimated value of assets. And what this does is it focuses our investment on the longevity or the performance life of critical systems. Now, there's a couple of things here that I want to make sure to draw your attention to. This is what a Nessie curve looks like. It is a cost projection, like what it takes to repair or replace our critical assets off in the future. Now, I want to be careful here. This is not the CIP, right? This is not a list of projects. What this shows is, by our best estimate, as our assets age and require significant maintenance or repair or replacement, what is the cost projection of replacing or repairing all of those critical assets, right? So this essentially is a theoretical view of what it would cost to replace our system, right, our physical infrastructure over the course of, let's say, 50 years or 25 years or something like that. The sort of ship of Theseus, right? Like, how can we turn over all of our assets and repair or replace them? What this isn't is a collection of projects that we are undertaking. This is a way for us, right, to say, okay, is our budgetary system, right, and our projected revenues, is it in line with roughly what we think, to the best of our ability to estimate or to project, how we are going to repair or replace all of our assets? And from that comes our CIP, a collection of projects that we do that has a 6-year timeline. Because not everything goes this way, right? Like, emergencies present themselves, opportunities present themselves, estimates can be incorrect in one way or the other. Things can last much, much longer than our estimated service life, or they can be much, much shorter, depending on various but I want to be sure that we understand, like, what this is what is meant by a Nessie curve. And the reason it's called the Nessie curve, and this isn't the best example, is sometimes it's a bimodal distribution, or there are several humps in it that make it look like the Loch Ness Monster. And in the industry, in the asset management industry, that's the name that it's sort of taken on. So you'll hear it referred to.
So I do have a question. I'm not familiar with Nessie curves, I have to say before my question, but is there like a target replacement cost versus repair cost that you're looking for in this kind of a curve?
Sorry, I'm not used to using this microphone. I had to make sure it was on. So, you know, a lot of those things are yet to be determined for us. Right now, and I'll let Eric step in here whenever necessary, but a lot of that is monitoring of the performance of assets. And so we say, like, as long as they are repairable, right, they might not be necessary to replace them. Sometimes there are opportunities to replace things as things are opened up, right? The analogy here, I think that's useful, and what's often used is talking about automobiles, right? You could say, like, if I follow manufacturer's recommendations, I take my car in every 3 months or so to have the oil changed and to do a suite of recommended maintenance, I can expect, right, there are well-developed, estimates on this. I can expect to spend this much a year and the car will last this long, right? However, there are different things go wrong, things present themselves as opportunities, or our needs change, and we have to get another car, say, to accommodate another family member, or in my case, one's teenager drives it into a van of plumbers, right? But so the idea would be that sometimes those things can be worked out by individual assets, and then there aren't generalized principles, that we monitor the performance of things, we attempt to maintain things, and extend the service life of those assets as long as possible. It's an excellent question.
I just, kind of a follow-up, so Is there a ratio that we're kind of looking for? How do we use a Nessie curve? I'm wondering.
Eric Dundee, Executive Director. So to specifically talk about the use of it, that is what we want to develop. We want to develop what our use looks like, because the idea of developing this curve, we got to get the data, we have to put it on there. For me, to step back a little bit, that is why these performance areas are kind of interconnected. So this Nessie curve, to me, directly relates to a performance area you haven't seen yet, which is on infrastructure reliability and our asset condition index. In this case, for me, how I would use this with the commission is, if I said, we have a graph, and this is just an example, but if we had the table that says, you know, we have a lot of assets coming of age, and it's $200 million, and to over-exaggerate, we only had $10 million in the CIP, we would be able to tell our story that says, well, with the Nessie curve, we have to do something about our budget, or increasing our projects, or increasing the replacement or repair of our assets to meet the needs of what we have. I don't know if that helped. Feel free to follow up.
Yeah, that helps. And I had a similar question. Seth prefaced some of this by saying performance areas, ask ourselves whether they would be appropriate commission or public-facing indicators. And when I look at this, my answer to that question is maybe. And right now, I don't understand enough about the work that's going to be done to put our Nessie curve together, and whether it's going to be understandable enough to be a public-facing performance indicator. But at this point, I would say, if we can do it, it would be great. So I'm all on board with this one now.
Okay, Badri, you have your hand up, and Dan, did you want to go? So Badri and then Dan.
Yeah, I just first time I heard Nessie curve was at when we were installing solar panels in our house, right? So where they showed that your solar production or the grid usage goes down rapidly during the day, and it gets in the evening, it goes all the way to the top, right? So it's just my question here is, are we actually, an infrastructure cost wise, wouldn't we want it to be like a flat line where we have year after year, there should be a very consistent usage, rather than 1 year we have really completely zero infrastructure cost, and all of a sudden we have the huge infrastructure cost the next year.
Yeah,
it's just
Commissioner Lankella, that's the exact question. So, for instance, we, over the last few years, or as long as I've been here, we have talked about, are we spending the right amount of money in our CIP? And if you want to balance your rate stability, once again, connecting another performance area and one of its indicators in here, to do exactly what you said. If you can remove the humps, remove Nessie's humps in the water and make it a smooth line, or at least be able to project out reasonably, then we are avoiding some of those rate increases that go up and down, or some of the high costs. Now, the one thing we also have to remember is it's the nature of our business to do CIP projects that could be very large. So when the financing, or when we're projecting rates, it is about futuristic look. If we know we have a $50 million or $100 million project coming up, don't wait to have rates meet that goal unless you want to have a very large increase in the year that begins.
that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. So we don't want to see the Nessie monster in this curve. That's all our goal is. That's what our indicator KPI is here.
I mean, in reality, you should have nesties, but you can smooth them out over time by doing different things. But if you don't have nesties, then I have a question about the graph. And two, you can't always look at the global picture. You have to look at like one big nestie for the company. If you have a lot of new stuff and a lot of old stuff, it won't look that bad. You start looking at individual areas, it starts looking bad in certain areas. So you can get a false good looking at everything when you know a lot of stuff is bad, but you got to make sure what you're looking at. It's just like any other data source that you pull stuff in. You got to make sure the underlying data is good too, because it could show this, but we don't know that somewhere in the 10th year out that there's a whole bunch of bad in there. You just almost have to look at nesties at different levels of pumps versus. I mean, you can't use it generically to say everything's great. I just don't want to get false positive on it, I'd say.
My comment is we just have to be careful what we're showing, that it's meaningful information, because garbage in, garbage out, and you want to be able to make it understandable. And it gets back to those useful cost and clarity, I think, is what you had said earlier, Seth, is that that's actually transferable to those parameters. Because you get so much data that the data can tell you nothing, or it's meaningless data that you're trying to use to do something, going down the wrong path because you're using meaningless data.
That's just testing that I understand kind of what we're thinking about here, and I get that this is a financial metric. We're going to get to infrastructure metrics in a different way when we come to that one. So being careful there that we don't get sort of too fine-grained with thinking about infrastructure and CIP and asset management kind of stuff here. These are fake numbers we're looking at, right? These aren't our numbers. You haven't programmed in our numbers, or are these?
No, and I get, and eventually I'll get to kind of where we are with this particular metric. This is merely an example that was sort of like explicit enough to sort of just show what the construction of the curve is. Yes. No,
here's a question to test whether I'm understanding how this would work when we put our numbers in. We did some substantial deployment of assets when we did the 11th edition. We're doing it again now with liquid processing. We're going to see the bump where we put a whole bunch of assets in, and then again, if it's within the time range, when they reach the end of their life, right? Is that kind of how this curve will show those massive deployments of new assets? Am I understanding it right?
Yes, that is correct. And Commissioner Linkella said that perhaps we should have like a flat curve so we had a consistent investment, which agree, like we would like to be able to do something like that, but we don't control the inputs of and necessities of the prior district, right? Like, or the prior, additions to the district. That's very astute, right? So the Nessie curve reflects the previous work done and expansions and that sort of stuff and how those assets age out, right? And some things, sometimes predicted service life can be incorrect. We have pipes that are at this point 95 years old. They're doing just fine. We have, I know with the water utility, when we did something like this in my previous job, the oldest pipe in the system was the best, and stuff from the 60s and 70s was the worst. And it's technology dependent, installation, maintenance, that kind of stuff. And from that, I think you correctly point out that you will sort of see those different investments and expansions in the district reflected in something like that. Is correct.
Thank you. And here's the second one that's sort of testing the understanding of it and thinking about kind of what Brad brought up about whether this would be useful to the public. Let's say I'm going to pick on the city of Milwaukee's waterworks just a little bit with a sort of half real, half abstracted example. I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, at one time they were on a 100-year replacement interval for water mains. Let's pretend, for the sake of my example, that water mains have a life of about 50 years. You've got a structural problem because you need to be getting back to replacement a lot closer to the useful life of 50 years. If you're on 100, you're behind and you're never going to catch up and you're in trouble, right? Am I?
You are
off
absolutely,
base.
no,
So this
that
would
is
tell
correct.
you if you're in that kind of situation and be red flags flying to say,
Precisely.
oops, we better get something changing to get back under control here. Isn't that one of the ways this would be a useful tool for us?
That is precisely correct. In fact, I would say that is an excellent summation of what this is. The reason to address Commissioner Paltz's comment, right? Like, this is a very large view, or a very coarse view of our finances and infrastructure, such that we can make changes at the sort of structural level, or the most sort of like largest, let's just say, like, in general, we are on the right path in terms of our income and expenditures, such that our system can perform, as necessary. And with the Milwaukee Water Utility, their largest single asset class would probably be that water main. And so getting that group correct and on the correct timeline would be the most crucial thing for them. Yes, that is exactly correct. Can we make institutional changes such that we are on the correct timeline for investment?
Okay, so what's your goal with this? Are you going to keep it at that broad, overarching scale for the whole plant, the collection system, everything? Or are you going to maybe break it, do like one, okay, you do the overall one, then you do one for the plant, you do one for the collection system? Is that what you're trying to figure out? Just going to keep it very broad, or you're going to try to nail it down?
No, thank you for that question. So this is constructed at the individual asset level, right? And so every asset is in a very large database that we have, that we currently use for this and other purposes, has information on the asset, how old it is, what its prospective service life is, the percentage it's been used, its projected replacement cost, and its assessed condition, right? And so those different views would be available, and this would be the highest level view of all assets, but those would be available. Now I do need to say all that information is not yet available, and I am going to address that in a subsequent slide here. But I would say this is going to be very carefully constructed to avoid the garbage in, garbage out. Like, there are assumptions that'll need to be made, but they are explicit and based, I think, on some sort of agreed assumptions about largely how these assets function in age.
The reason I'm asking that is because if you take the collection system, we all have seen the graph of year installed, and so the bulk of our collection system was installed in the late 60s, 70s, and so it's basically at its design life, right, 50 years. So you're going to have this big thing, and then on the other hand, you've got treatment plant where some parts of a treatment plant and even like a major improvement that we do, like the 11th edition or whatever, parts age at different points in time. So that's, and so, the blowers might age differently than the generators. Anyway, so this sounds like that's kind of what you're working toward, but I was just more curious as to how fine-grained you wanted to get this in terms of application to try to figure it out, because you could do the fine grain and then put it all together. It seems like they have a lot of the data for that fine-grained approach. Maybe not all, but so that's just
Thank you. Continuing on, last one, balance relative to reserve requirements. Gotcha. Sorry. So next steps. Did I miss one? I'm so sorry. Yes, debt service coverage ratio. This is our last KPI for the financial resilience performance area. Net revenues divided by annual debt service. This is a critical KPI for financial stability and bond covenant compliance. I may ask Bill to step in here if you guys have additional questions, but essentially this tells us like, are we using all of our money to pay, for previous debts, or to what is a sustainable level, of debt for us to carry? And this is a KPI that monitors that on a regular basis.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Freeze. So this is really Seth, you, Bill, Dan, I imagine, you know, there must be an answer for this, right? That what an acceptable range is for a business such as this, right? That something that, standards, right, in terms of what you want to hit.
Can I deal with that question on the next slide? Okay. I'd like to talk about that in the larger context of what a KPI is and what we're still working on to develop these. I just want you to hold that thought for just a second, because I think it's a really good one, and I'd just like to address it somewhat systematically.
Yeah, this might be a dumb question, but you have net revenue. So that would seem to me that it would take out cost, revenue minus the cost to get that revenue. Is that what it means? Because I'm trying to figure, you know, as a district, most of our revenues are basically cost-based, right? We don't really have a lot of revenue that's profit. You know what I mean? So that's when I think of net revenue, I think of that's the profit. But we don't really, so I was trying to think of what that meant, because we don't operate on a profit basis. We operate on a cost basis. You know, we recover, our major thing is our, now we do get some profit when we have really wet years, because our flows are higher than we expected, and you get more money in than maybe it costs to treat it, but, you know, in the perfect world, for a cost. So I was just curious what that net meant.
Eric Dundee, Executive Director. This is where these comments are important. This is why we're bringing this. So we can look at that if that's the exact language we want to use, or we want to change that. So, yeah, this is part of this process of us working through this.
I think you want to say cash flow, net cash flow. That's what really matters. I mean, if you take in 10 billion and you spend 9.9 billion, didn't take in 10, you only got 0.1. So, I mean, that's what you can pay your debt with, is net cash flow, not from revenue.
Thank you. Okay. Next one. Okay. Next steps. Commissioner Freeze, here's where I'm going to get to your question. Something I should have said at one of the first slides. Key performance indicators have three elements. There is a metric, right, like the actual number that you're presenting. There's a rationale, which is essentially like, what work is this doing? Why are we using it? Why do we feel it's valuable? What questions does it answer? How are you going to use it? Blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And then the last part of a key performance indicator is an acceptable range, which is the question that Commissioner Freeze was asking. Some of these acceptable ranges are given to us. Marty's presentation demonstrated that really nicely. The DNR says you will do these things. Here's the acceptable range for pollutants, et cetera, et cetera. The Commission has laid out in its policy book that balance relative to reserve requirements has an acceptable range according to Commission policy. Sometimes we need to decide what that range is. In the realm of debt service and in the realm of at-risk assets, that range is reflective of what we as a district consider to be acceptable risk, right? Can we live with pushing pipes way past their service date? You know, we have evidence that shows that 50 years, you know, is pipes do fine after that, right? Can we push that to 100 years and therefore live with a larger risk in our infrastructure system? Can we live with larger debt service? These are surprisingly, there is not a lot of agreement on a lot of this. A lot of it has to do with how the Commission feels around this risk and what it feels that we can carry as a district. And so in terms of debt service, I'm not exactly sure like how well that's been established. There are rules of thumb, I know, for individuals and that kind of stuff. As we know, like some companies and some institutions carry much more debt than others. These are to be decided upon by us, I guess is what I would say. Yes, sir.
We just redid all the balance, policies in the last month-ish. We just redid all of them for all the three funds. So I think, just so you, I don't know if you knew that or not, but yeah, we had just redone them all.
Yeah, that's reflected on the second bullet there of our KPI 1, the acceptable ranges. So just trying to recognize that work. Yep. But this is a good point, if I would take the opportunity since the mic is on, this is a good point to decide as a commission how you're going to work on these acceptable levels. You know, or is the commission as a whole gonna say, Finance Committee, please review debt service coverage ratio with staff and bring some options or ideas. You know, that's how this would go, is in my head.
Oh, God, so sorry. Any questions so far on key performance indicators, on the financial capacity and resilience performance area, general questions on the process, and then do we want we're gonna stop after this one? Okay. And if there are no questions, great. But otherwise, yes, sir.
The only comment I have is for like these fund balances, we need data before we can do finance part. All the assets aren't in your system and all that stuff. Then all the financial data, all this stuff is, I mean, that's the key, is the underlying data. If that isn't there, then everything we're doing is just throwing darts. So, I mean, that's why it takes a while to do this.
Yes, thank you so much for your question. That's excellent. So if we look at KPI 2 here, large gaps in the asset register need to be addressed, which is exactly your point. We have an enormous amount of data, but we don't have all of it. I'm not sure what data we need to decide on debt service, other than having a better assessment of the condition of our assets, that'll lead toward a better NESI curve, right? That we might say, we are simply going to have to carry more debt in order to deal with some of this, in order to right size our cash flow, to your point. Yes. So this is a focus of several groups within the district, is bringing this risk register up to date with condition assessment and cost estimates for replacement. We're estimating at this point about 2 years until that can be completed. At this point, I can't remember the exact number, but we're dealing with about 8,000 or so assets, all of which have different cost components and excuse me, need to be assessed for condition and that kind of stuff. But myself and others have a plan for moving forward on that. So I want to thank you for your question, because that's an excellent point. Having a good data foundation is sort of instrumental to
So kind of following up on what Dan was talking about, and Seth, what you were talking about, is as I think about these, I have no frame of reference for KPI 3, right? But for the NESI part, what you talked about, is I have a total frame of reference, which is in deciding how long that asset can really last versus, so not in your particular world, but in the one I live in, right? There's an acceptable range, right, that I would say our accountants would as, Greg, we depreciate assets over 80 years. That's okay. And then if you ask me as an engineer, Greg, how long is this going to last? I can make a guess, okay? And I'm going to say that the guess that I make, or any of your staff here at the district make, is going to be better than that 80-year number that is the industry standard, right? And that is going to have a real impact on that KPI 2 as you decide, you know what I mean? Because that's the underlying data. So, what I'm trying to do here is get to Eric's point, is what is the commission's role in this? I don't know, but I do know that you have people on staff who know, as much as I know about my system and can put together better data than Dan, myself, and Patrick could put together, in the financial. So I guess where I'm going here is there's going to have to, if the finance committee is going to be involved in these, which I think eventually they do need to be. As you mentioned, I think there's a lot of work here that has to be done on your guys' end with expertise that we don't have. So this is more of a statement. It's not really a question for you. I'm just trying to work through in my head how we get involved, really.
I think some of it would be simply saying that yes, this NESI curve produced from our asset register is an acceptable measure, and that you view that as something valuable to see as an overall measure of district performance. I completely agree with you, and that is a condition assessment of our assets reflects the professional judgment of the engineers and maintenance staff, and it would supersede any accounting definition of useful life and depreciation. That's absolutely true. That's part of this 2 years. There is an initial guess at a lot of these things, but Matt Schumann, who runs our reliability-centered maintenance program, is starting to incorporate asset condition assessment as part of just regular maintenance and those sorts of things. And so we have plans to do that and to make sure that there is a check and that we're not simply going on industry standard, because those are also, to be frank, can be a little self-serving, and we want to make sure that it's sort of reflective of our experience and our knowledge and those sorts of things. But in this case, it might be that the commission merely decides that, yes, we agree that we are trusting district staff to present this information, and this is reflective of your expertise, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Beth, on the topic of annual debt service, long-term debt service versus revenue, it would help me to see what's the history on that been for the last 10 to 15 years. I think we're all going to try to put a number on something that's hard to quantify. And my guess is that the final answer is going to be need versus rate increase somewhere in that area, because Tom's point before, everything we do has a cost of sale here. It's not like debt versus revenue in a for-profit business, right? So I think it's going to fall in between need and rates.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of the danger of doing this one performance area at a time. Each performance area is going to be have its own separate piece, and we will have to holistically look at all of these performance areas, and one may tell you one story, one may tell you another, and they're conflicting. But the whole point for us with a strategic plan that has these performance areas is that we can actually have the conversations with data. We don't have all the data now, but if we can say that we are committing to this, staff can put resources to it and we can work through it. So I do want us to step back a second and say, big view here, the whole point is for us to be able to have those conversations a little easier.
You brought up the issue of self-serving. It kind of reminds me of the DNR people who wrote the permit being the ones that hold the hearing. But it always makes me think when you see that American Society of Civil Engineers come up with their infrastructure report. Well, it's a D. Well, of course, they're going to say it's a D. But anyway, I think what it really gets, we talked about acceptable measures, or we've been talking about that, and I think the jury's still out on how we grasp those, because obviously the need for information is discussed. But it also gets down to the idea of the level of acceptable risk. Is to, like you said, some pipes are just fine after 60, 70 years. Others are bad after 50 years. Could be related to construction, could be related to soil, a whole host of factors, the waste flow, whatever. So, we've talked a lot over different years about acceptable risk, and I don't know that anybody ever has I don't know anybody's ever gonna have a reliable solution, because it's always balancing the cost of a project and our rate increase with doing that project. As we've seen in the past, when we start getting out of sync with projects, we get pushback from our customer community. When you're trying to do maybe a little too much at certain points in time. Or because let's face it, this, the capital budget's really kind of the driver here. So I think part of me wonders if, when former chief engineer and director, he talked at one point about going to, it's probably about 8-10 years ago now, going to more but smaller projects. And now that was when we first started liquid processing. Now liquid processing, gigantic project. I don't know if that was part of his idea, was to smooth the cost, or smooth the replacement, or both. Eric?
Yeah, Eric Dundee, Executive Director. So I'm going to go on the record and say that you have to figure out what you have for staffing. If you're going to break projects into smaller chunks, but you don't have enough staff to deliver it, the curve goes the wrong way. We do not keep up. I would tell you, and I will say this in a public meeting, liquid processing, we broke into 3 phases, and we don't even have the 3rd phase in planning yet. And we are coming up on 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from when that was done, the planning phase of that. For me, that is inherently telling me that we're behind, and that's part of one of my executive director measures and messages for this year is we have these generational projects that if you do not do them at the right time or be proactive about building that infrastructure, a domino effect afterwards causes the commission and the customer communities pain with rates, because at some point an executive director would have to sit at this table and tell you, if we don't catch up, we are going to be into a phase of waiting 100 years to replace a pipe that's only got a life of 50. Get off my soapbox, but that was part of that.
One last comment. One advantage to using the key performance indicators, in particular the ones that we've chosen, is it allows you to, or allows the district to compare itself to other wastewater utilities. And this can be enormously helpful in telling the story to our customer communities and constituents. When we compare our debt service ratio, our income, or our cash flow, our budgets, that kind of stuff, and the stuff that we're doing, I think it allows us to tell that story more comprehensively and more convincingly to those that might be a little wary of some of these larger expenditures. Because I think it can just be incredibly useful for that purpose, and also give us a sense of if we are sort of keeping up with these various things, especially when we're able to compare ourselves to similar utilities.
Last thing, building on Eric's part there, if something gets laid, it takes 10 years, 5% more every year it costs. $1 million, and before you know it, it's $1.8 million, because we couldn't get it done in the first couple of years. So, I mean, we have to look at your juice and squeezing thing. Do you hire more engineers, get stuff done quicker and faster, or consultants or whatever? Because even though the consultants and people costs, everything costs 5% more every year forever, then you actually cost more. But you gotta, it's the juice and the squeeze thing.
Just looking at this as the financial capacity and resilience performance area, thinking big picture, we've got 3 key performance indicators, which, by the way, just to jump on board with Brad, I'm feeling good about after today's presentation. I am noticing they're all capital related. There's a lot of ways in which that makes sense. We're a capital driven organization, but we do have cost centers that are on the O&M side, and staffing's in there. I think about, I'll be honest, I'm thinking about people in the Affordable Care Act exchange who have health care going up 150%. What if we were suddenly facing that? Is this a proper place for us to also have maybe one indicator that tells us about in advance so we can plan for it and be watching it, things that are on that other side that's not the debt side, not the capital side. Sorry, I meant not debt, but not the capital side, but that other part that's smaller but still important and significant in terms of driving our costs. And that maybe relatedly is, what about a revenue? Suddenly there's new levy limits imposed on local government at the state level, and we can't push rates out like we have been accustomed to, and so we can't bring in revenues like we need. I'm just thinking about what other things could be out there that could change. It might drive problems for us around financial capacity and resilience that we maybe would want to think about in KPIs here. Rhetorical more so than unless you want to react, but just while we're thinking big picture about this. Thank you.
One thing I would say is we do have a maintenance indicator in the infrastructure resilience performance area. There is that. I explicitly asked the management team to limit themselves to 3 indicators from this first go-round. And so, I mean, not that those aren't excellent points. I also think we want to make sure our indicators are focused on things that we can control and affect. And so they would be distinct from external pressures that we're looking at. Not that they aren't important, I just think we might think about them differently. In terms of staffing and stuff like that, I think that's an excellent question. That is a bit above my pay grade, so I'd defer to Eric to answer anything around that.
Is there one thing, maybe another, I know you don't want to go past 3, but 4 would be operating little debt, just how they're a percentage of revenue. I mean, that's where Ezra's trying to go to some extent, I think, is just, so we raised 60 million, 30 million goes to operating. That's probably not good. And I'm sure there's a KPI, and if you look at other districts, you can see how much the revenue is versus what their normal operating costs are, something like that, which wouldn't be a very hard indicator to create. I mean, that would be pretty simple. It wouldn't take a lot of work.
Okay, anybody else have any comments or questions? Beth?
Just following up on Ken's, Dan's suggestion about, and Ezra's, about trying to fold in one more indicator related to operating costs.
Yeah, duly noted.
Yeah, just to get to where my vision is going with this is we're going to go through each one of these indicators at each meeting. We obviously are taking notes and doing that, and then coming back in March with some sort of summary of these conversations that we can go through. I mean, the whole goal for us is we want to continue as staff to keep working on a 3-year plan and a work plan, you know, for things that we know are the top priorities. As the commission chews on these, it's about, is it going to make decisions easier, harder, or neutral on budget decisions, you know, for 27? But we're going to be right in that time frame of starting to develop that. So,
and in looking at the coming meetings, the idea is to cover one of the performance areas each meeting: infrastructure reliability, public trust, and then regulatory compliance. And by the end of the second quarter, you guys are 3-year plan available to present to the commission.
I believe Commissioner Murphy has read my notes. So yes, that is where we're trying. That's where we're trying to go. So that's how we're setting out the timeline right now.
And then the comment is thinking about commission's involvement in this, in addition to providing comments on the individual indicators at each of the meetings. By the time we get to the end of the second quarter and there's a 3-year plan available, that might be an appropriate time to come back and revisit the document, decide whether there are any tweaks that are needed to it, and potentially ask the commission to bless the whole thing.
I would support that plan.
I just want to comment or add to a point that Ezra made about staffing, and making sure that somehow staffing is incorporated into these KPIs, because staffing is what's going to limit the rate at which we move ahead with a lot of these capital projects. And somehow, I really believe staffing needs to be somewhat incorporated into these financial KPIs. And I don't know how you would do that, but I want to make sure that that's a part of it.
Eric Dundee, Executive Director. I would tell you the staffing is that internal pieces of these KPIs. So as you talk about them and it's, hey, we are behind, those are the things that I end up back at the commission meeting talking about in budget process, or as we're talking capital improvement updates, and Lisa Coleman is here, and we're talking about, oh, we're behind or in forward. So to me, staffing is embedded into all of these things. It's not something I would draw out as the first thing to look at, because to Commissioner Pultz's case before in his comments, you got to decide, is it a staffing thing? Is it a finding consultants or help? Is it a delivery process thing? So we got to go through each one, but to the point of the strategic plan, knowing what we're trying to measure and aim for is going to be the first step in that.
Okay, I think we've done that issue. Thank you very much, Seth. Good discussion, Commission. So that will take us to the Executive Director update.
Yep, thank you. 2 items of note here. So the first is, unfortunately, on December 25th, we had a treatment facility overflow. Basically, 500 gallons of digested sludge came out of one of our digesters that the hatch wasn't fully secured. Luckily, we have dedicated staff. They found it, and we were able to clean it up right away. DNR notice and compliance reporting was all completed on that. The second item I have is an announcement, an update on the organizational alignment work. So we have officially, I can announce 2 new directors for the district. We have a Director of Operations and Maintenance, who is Alan Grooms, and we have a Director of Planning and Engineering, that is Jen Hurlebus. So those 2 positions have been filled. They're in the room. I turn around. So for the organizational alignment work, that means we have now completed that step, and we will continue to work on manager level positions. So those are my 2 updates.
I think we're up to Vanessa on legal update. Thank you. Since Tom's not here, I'm stepping in pro tem. Over to you,
I think there may be committee reports first.
Zephyr. Jump in then too, since I've got the hot mic. On the Executive Director Review Subcommittee, just quick updates. We are working on the process with MGT. The hired consultant that's helping us evaluate our process and think about what we want to use for a process going forward. And so I think probably by now everyone's maybe had their interview check-in with staff from MGT, or at least you've got it scheduled. I know I've just had mine this week. And so appreciate commissioners chiming in with their thoughts on this process and what we want to get out of it at the commission level. And we'll just keep working through that process. We've got a whole set of meetings now through the first quarter to drive towards having something to come back to you with, I think, in the second quarter. And that is, I feel like there's one other thing and I'm forgetting. Go ahead, Eric. Remind me what I'm forgetting.
The executive Director Subcommittee will also be working with the Executive Director on 2026 goal
Yes.
development.
Yeah, we need, in the interim here, while we're working on a process, we do need to start out 26 with goals that we can then look back at whatever intervals we're gonna look back and measure performance and work with Eric on that. So that's something we're gonna be working on. And the other thing, I think I may not have mentioned this because the meeting was right in the middle of December. Can't remember which side of our commission meeting it was on, but we, had our, 6-month check-in with Eric and the coach that he's working with, and got some in-depth information, about that process and how that's going at the committee level, which was really helpful. I think we might have shared some of that with the commission in December, but anyway, that's the other latest thing we've been up to. Greg, over to you for the other committee.
Thank you. Commissioner Freeze, Financial Committee update. We met on Monday and, basically did two things. One, we came up with, Eric's goals for the to meet the financial goal. Ezra, that'll roll into your 2026 goals that you mentioned. And then we kind of came up with a plan and created more work probably for the commission. So, one of the things that we've been looking at is our commission policy book has financial things scattered throughout it, pretty significant ones. We addressed the big ones, the reserve policies, as Dan mentioned earlier, sometime in the last 6 months. There are a number of other things in there that could be looked at. And so I think as we left that meeting, our agreement there was that we are going to ask the new finance manager, when they get on board, to look at that part of the commission handbook, or policy book, I should say, and give recommendations with regard to the finance part. We already had Vanessa look at those to make sure we were legally fine, which we basically were. But there is some just policy that in terms of what it says and how it's written, really. But that spurred a larger discussion for the commission as a whole with regard to the commission policy book. So that is potentially a bigger topic for the commission to decide how we want to move forward. If you've taken a look at the commission policy book, it is pretty significant, we will say, in terms of what it says and how it is written. And really the question for the commission is how we want to move forward with that. There is nothing, I think, our subcommittee anyway, nothing urgent here, but from a usefulness perspective, the policy book could, I think we all agree, could use some work. And how we work on that is a topic for the larger committee.
Okay, so I think we should probably have that as an agenda item sometime. And I don't know, we've got two subcommittees. I don't know if it'd be worth creating a third, or the whole commission do it in over the course of time.
Yeah, so Eric Dunn, the Executive Director. I do want to make sure with this kind of conversation, we consider staff time, and I will just be the first to tell you that that cannot start anytime soon in a large project for staffing support. Even if we did get a consultant to help us do that with the commission, you still need a project manager, and we just don't have that capacity right now. But this, I will put back a pin into the work plan. If the commission wants to have a list of projects that they want that we can consider, this is something we can just put on the list. So,
Why don't you do that, and then maybe get us at some point what that list is, so maybe we can help prioritize it.
I would actually hope the commission will work on that list together. So maybe it's something at a commission meeting.
Yeah, why don't we do that at a commission meeting? You come with your list, and we'll help try to prioritize and see what could be added, what could be taken out, or whatever. And then you can then figure out how that all fits within the timing of a staffing structure, right? Kind of a work plan. Okay, anything else, Greg? Thank you. I do know it took us quite a while to come up with that fish policy book. We had several meetings. When the first 9-member commission was formed, I think is when we came up with that. Okay. So, regulatory and legal, Vanessa?
Good morning, Vanessa Wishart, Legal Counsel. I want to note 2 legislative updates, in addition to, well, included in, but to update from what's included in the packet today. One, Marty very helpfully put on my radar, because it was not on my radar because it's primarily an abortion-related bill. It's AB 718, SB 734, that was introduced in December. Again, it largely relates to abortion requirements, but there's 2 provisions that could impact wastewater utilities. The first is that the bill would require DNR to require wastewater treatment plants to regularly test for the presence of endocrine disruptors in their effluent. And the second is that the bill would specifically identify an endocrine disruptor as a hazardous substance under the state spills law. So I'm working with Marty on what the potential impact on the district could be on that proposed bill. There's nothing scheduled yet for a hearing. I would not anticipate this bill to make it past the governor's desk. So I don't think there's a significant chance that this becomes an issue for the district, but I did want to highlight it for you because it was introduced in December. The second bill I want to highlight is a bill related to the use of drones. So there is already a statute prohibiting the use of drones over correctional institutions, and there is now a bill in front of the legislature, SB 766, AB 768, that just actually had a hearing in the Assembly yesterday, that would include wastewater treatment facilities as another type of infrastructure over which you may not fly an unauthorized drone in a certain amount of airspace. That bill has the support of the league. I think it is generally supported. So that is one that I think probably will continue to advance. And then I'm happy to take questions about anything else included in the packet or otherwise.
Our future meeting schedules in the packet. Again, if anybody's going to be absent for a meeting or going to be attending virtual, let staff know so they can put it on the calendar. Any future agenda topics? Discuss that one. Any other business? Motion to adjourn?
I have one question. It seems like some of us on the commission is getting emails to do IT questionnaires or make sure you don't do stupid stuff training. Who is getting that? And then if you don't do it, you get nasty grams constantly saying, you haven't done it in 30 days, you haven't done it. So I'm one of them.
I'm one of them.
Does anybody else get any of that? Or, I mean, are we supposed to? I mean, it's fine doing it. It's just, I get one like once a month-ish.
I'm going to welcome Amanda Wegner up here as Manager of Public Affairs and Communications to explain what should be happening and that you will be doing our cybersecurity training.
Good morning. I am not your IT manager here at the district, but I can answer this question. So this goes to your district email. So if you are not checking your district email on a regular basis, you are not getting the IT cybersecurity training. So this is something that the district implemented a few years ago to help shore up our cybersecurity. It's in constant threat, so we all need to stay proactive in learning. So you do get compensated for taking the training, and we can see. And yes, if you don't do it, just like staff, you get a regular reminder. And we can help you forward that. We can help you forward that to your regular email, or walk you through how to do that. So, yes, if you are not regularly checking your district email, you are not seeing that. But I know Commissioner Pultz and Commissioner Hubble are very good about that. So, gold stars for cybersecurity.
Commissioner Clark, I'll make that motion, Tom.
Second, Commissioner Freeze.